Welcome again, folks, to another book review. I am Brian Lee Durfee, author of The Forgetting Moon, The Blackest Heart, and The Lonesome Crown, all published by Simon & Schuster's Saga Press. Today, we are going to be reviewing one of my favorite books of all time, All the Light We Cannot See by Anthony Doerr. This thing won the Pulitzer Prize. Well deserved, well deserved. It came out, I think, in about 2014. I'm not sure. I read it the week it came out. I just was taken. I walking through the bookstore, knew nothing about it. It was on the new release rack in the Barnes & Noble. I was just absolutely stunned by this cover. I loved it. I could tell it was a European scene of some European fortress type city. And I'm like, I got to pick that up and see what it's about. I read the back and I'm like, I'm buying this book. Lo and behold, it went on to become one of the biggest selling books in the history of the world. And I got to go to the guy's book signing when he rolled through Salt Lake. He lives up in Idaho. When he rolled through Salt Lake a few weeks after this came out, I went to his book signing and his little presentation, and he signed my book. You know, I always show off my signed books. A first edition of All the Light We Cannot See by Anthony Doerr. And let me tell you something about this cover, which is a great cover. That is actually a picture of Saint Malo, France. When I went to France, I made it a point, because I had read this book, and I had read all about Saint Malo, France in this book. I made it a point to go to Normandy, and I stayed in Saint Malo. I stayed right there in that city. Stayed in Saint Malo for about 2 nights. Looked around the city, walked around the ramparts. Oh my gosh, what a gorgeous place. If you get a chance to go to Saint Malo, France, it is amazing. I mean, it is a fortress set out on the ocean. It's a walled city with a fortress around it and a big castle. And as you look out across the channel, the English Channel, north towards England, you can see all these other little islands out there that have fortresses on them. Some of them you can even walk to when the tide is low enough. You can even walk to those fortresses from St. Malo. You can walk out along the sand to some of the other fortresses and visit those. But most of them are way too far out, but they're just sprinkled out throughout the ocean, just as far as the eye can see. I was just like, whoa, I just had no idea this kind of place existed, right? Until I read this book. And that's the beauty of reading. And a lot of you follow me because I'm a fantasy writer and you are fantasy readers, and I'm telling you, most of the great literature out there it's beyond the fantasy genre. I mean, the fantasy genre has a lot of great stuff, but just some of the other stuff that's going to blow your mind. That's why you got to read outside of the fantasy genre once in a while, because you're going to discover stuff about your own world that is every bit as spectacular and fantasy-like as your favorite fantasy books. And then you can go to Europe and visit those castles and cathedrals and fortresses and just be like, wow, and some of you have. I'm sure some of you have been to St. Malo. Oh my gosh, I can't talk about it enough. Can't talk about it enough. If you go to my Instagram or my Facebook page, you'll see all my photos of that stuff. Absolutely wonderful. And I get to write off those trips on my taxes because they're research trips. All works out for Durfee. It all works out for Durfee. It does. Life is good. Life is good. Because life is good is because we get to read great books like this. We get to visit great places. And when we get to write our own books. And you know I do writing advice along with the book reviews. Let's get to All the Light We Cannot See. What is it even about? Enough about me. I mean, I want all of these videos to just strictly be about me. But once in a while, we got to talk about a book or two. All the Light We Cannot See. Pulitzer Prize winning book set in World War II. That's all you need to say. All you need to say. There's a little girl, 6 years old, in 1934, living in Paris, named Marie. She's blind. Her father, Daniel, he works at the National Historical Museum there in Paris, and he is a locksmith, and he puts together a lot of little clever puzzles for her to figure out. And one of the things he's done for her is, since she's blind, he has built a little tiny model of of their neighborhood. Like, he's measured everything out in their neighborhood, all the buildings and fire hydrants and street curbs and park benches, and he's built it in a little tiny model that she can set on the table, and she can feel it with her hands. So if she ever goes outside, she knows exactly where she is by feeling it on the model, and then she can feel it in real life. And he just builds that for her, and so she can get around. And it's pretty cool. That's how it starts out. And then we jump to Germany, to Zollverein, Germany. I think that's how you pronounce it. Zollverein, Germany, where we've got an 8-year-old boy named Werner and his little sister named Jutta. And they are just kind of peasant kids living in peasant circumstances in Zollverein. It's kind of a really dark, gritty, grimy, oily, industrial German city, right? And there's not much going on for these kids. They don't have a whole lot. They just don't have a whole lot. I mean, but Werner is fascinated with radios, and he's fascinated with electronics, and he just takes stuff that he finds and he builds it and creates it, and he creates all these little electronic gadgets and things, and he's really good at fixing radios. And they're not allowed to have radios, right? Because the SS and the Nazis, they don't want anybody listening to anything except for the Nazi propaganda. But Werner, he builds his own little radio that he can get radio signals from other places, right? And so he starts listening to science programs from France and across the world, and music programs from across the world. Him and his little sister Jutta, they sit there and they listen to all this stuff as just all the crazy Nazi stuff is building up around them in their grim existence of this industrial German city they live in. And so we get to follow Maria and Werner and Jutta as they grow up. And then in 1940, the war starts, and Paris is being attacked. And so Marie and her father, Daniel, they flee to St. Malo, to hide out in St. Malo. They've got some relatives up there, and that's going to be a lot safer in St. Malo than in Paris. So that's where we're going to hide out. And so that's what they do. And, the father builds this little, St. Malo's this walled city, and he builds a little thing for his daughter so she can feel and so she can learn the new city by feeling it with the little diorama he's built. And then Werner in Germany, he is older now, and so is his sister, and he is recruited because people have noticed he's got this aptitude for electronics and building like radios and things like this, and they're like, man, this kid's really skilled. And so he's kind of recruited into the SS Hitler Youth version of a technological college, right? And so then they get him even more skilled in espionage, like electronic espionage, like spying on stuff like electronically. And so then he becomes working for the SS as a spy, an electronic spy, with his buddy. What's his buddy's name? I might not be able to think of his buddy's name, but they have a good friendship there, and they're spies, and they get sent to St. Malo. And all the stories converge. And hanging over the whole thing, hanging over like an ominous cloud over the whole story, is we know that St. Malo was heavily, heavily, heavily bombed by the Allies when they were getting ready to come into France on D-Day. And so, that's hanging over the top of the whole story, because all of our characters that we love are now in St. Malo for their various reasons, and their stories are converging and intertwining. And yet we know that the place is going to get bombed. And that's where I'll leave you plot-wise. Because I'm telling you, this thing won the Pulitzer Prize for just its sheer storytelling brilliance. I mean, Anthony Doerr's writing is just He creates lines of such beauty and haunting beauty that just make you think about yourself and your own life and how lucky you have it, and just the world in general. Every line and every bit of information that he puts into the story, it's like every piece of information is backstory, and every bit of backstory and every little bit of information he puts about these puzzles that the father makes his little girl figure out, and every bit of information he puts about electronics and radios and airwaves and light waves. The story is all the light we cannot see. It's a lot of analogous to light waves and radio waves that we can't see, and how those things just are in our lives and causing like butterfly effect stuff. And every bit of that information is just building into this intricate plot and puzzle, kind of like the puzzles that the father creates for the little girl. The book itself is sort of a puzzle for the reader to kind of enjoy figuring out and putting together amidst this war adventure story, World War II. It's absolutely, it's all about light and the goodness and the good that we can do to each other and for each other in very dire circumstances. And the illuminated, it's about light and goodness and illumination and the illuminated ways that we can help each other, which is a good sort of, I'm shooting this video here in 2020, in the summer of 2020, which everybody knows is the crappiest summer of our lives, with COVID, with riots. Everything is just garbage. And we could use a little light that we cannot see. We could use a little illumination. And that's what this book is about. I give all the light we cannot see a great, great World War II story that will leave you breathless and haunted till the day you die. I give it 10 out of 10. It's one of my favorite books of all time. So much so that I took a trip to St. Malo in honor of the book. All the light we cannot see, folks. 10 out of 10. Trust me on this one. Trust me, you will love it.